Hello, Drupal fans. Welcome to Tag1 Team Talks, the podcast of Tag1 Consulting. I'm really excited to announce that after a year of work, Mauricio Dinarte has completed his game-changing step-by-step 31-part data migration blog post series, and we've packaged it as an ebook. This isn't just another tutorial. This is the ultimate guide for moving your Drupal 7 site to Drupal 10 or 11, and is created by a subject matter expert who's led many successful large-scale migrations and rescued many organizations from migration disasters. So what makes this tutorial different? Well, we give you everything: complete local environment with pre-configured source and target sites, real data to practice with, along with all of these detailed step-by-step instructions that don't assume you're a migrate expert. But I guarantee, even if you are a migration expert, you're going to learn a lot from this series too. Starting today, you can download the entire series as an ebook at no cost. No more hunting through the blog post to try and find what you're looking for or bookmarking dozens of pages. You can just go to tag1.com/migrate-book and grab your free copy. Even if you're migrating from Adobe or Sitecore or another CMS to Drupal, this data migration resource is really going to help you out because, let's be honest, data migrations are almost always the single most time-consuming and costly aspect of a platform migration. So you don't want to get it right, you need to get it right. And that's exactly what this guide helps you do. I'm Michael Meyers, the Managing Director at Tag1. Just a little bit of business before we get started. At Tag1, we build large-scale applications using Drupal, as well as many other technologies for leading organizations in every sector, including Pfizer, Google, the New York Times, the Department of Energy, the ACLU, just to name a few. Most organizations hire us because of our major contributions to open source projects, including Drupal. For over 20 years, our team has been responsible for many of the innovations that have helped make Drupal the second most popular content management system on the internet. And we apply that expertise in architecting the platform that powers millions of websites to ensure your mission-critical projects are a huge success. So if you need help with your website, platforms, or large-scale applications, please email us at info@tag1.com. That's TAG1.com. So let's jump in. Joining me today on the show are Tag1 team members and renowned migration experts, Mauricio Dinarte, the author of our migration series, whose passion for teaching and speaking has helped countless developers learn complex web technologies, and Lucas Heading, a top Drupal contributor, a maintainer of the Drupal Migrate subsystem, and a mentor to the mentors guiding new Drupal core contributors. Mauricio and Lucas, thanks so much for joining me and welcome back to the show.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here chatting about things that are so interesting.
So just to step back and set the stage, Mauricio, this book is 100% focused on data migration. Data migration is, a key and big part of a platform migration, but there's also other components to completing a platform migration. So Mauricio, just to get us started, data migration is a really critical and large part of platform migration, but it is a component. There are other important aspects as well. Why focus just on data migration in this series?
The primary reason is because we haven't found a similar guide that will give you in detail information about how to perform this operation from a migration standpoint. And there are a lot of guides about theming or custom module development, but for the migration in particular, there are good resources out there that will cover one topic or another, but we wanted to put a comprehensive guide that will guide you like step by step how to perform the operation and not only execute the migration, but also plan and think throughout the process so that decisions that you make today are going to make it easier for things that will come down the road. So as we're going to discuss in the podcast, before ever writing a single line of migration code at all, we actually take the time of planning, and that's what we wanted to offer. We wanted to give you a guide where you can study your current website or application, plan what you want to do next in Drupal 10 or Drupal 11, and basically connect the dots one step at a time.
I know with 31 posts, over 300 pages of content, it puts it into context. Data migration is a really difficult topic to cover, and I'm sure there were more things you wanted to cover or more depth that you wanted to go into. So doing more, sure, if we had another 2 years, but yeah, like you said, there's a lot of great resources. So who is this book for? Like, who should care about this? Who should read it? Who's going to get value out of it?
I would like to say that this book is for everyone. Um, if you are a business leader or a project manager, by reading at least the first few sections of the book, where not necessarily we are writing migrations, you are going to get a very good understanding of the needs and requirements to, you know, do a project like this, to perform a migration. And there are topics about planning, about strategy. There are guides about estimating efforts. So this is going to give you a clue of how much it is going to cost, both in terms of time and resources. Also, and I would say the primary audience would be developers, in which after those planning phases, we give you like a development environment in which you can execute all the exercises that are explained in the book, and we give you like one step at a time. And in some cases, we go back in time basically, because that happens in real life. You, after working on something, you identify the need to tweak things that have already been done, and we give you we basically simulate a real life scenario in which things that are covered next unveil things that you might have overseen in the past, and then we explain, this is how you should have done it or plan it, and so on. But basically it is, if you're a developer, it is like at the like line by line, in some cases giving you the commands that you need to execute to perform the whole migration.
I've been part of a lot of migrations. I've led large scale migrations, and I have to say I read this and learned something in every post. So I definitely encourage people that are going to be participating in a migration to check this out. You're really going to benefit from it. The book, the blog post series is broken down into four main topics. It covers the planning and preparation. There's the example repository and tooling, along with how to do and run automated migrations. There's migrating configuration, and lastly, migrating content. We're going to talk a little bit about each of those sections. But before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the things that really surprised me in this book. I thought it would be exclusively, I mean, and this is just my perspective, having done mostly large scale migrations. I thought this would be exclusively about the Migrate API. And Lucas, as one of the maintainers of the Migrate API, I'm curious, why go beyond that? Like, I hadn't thought of other use cases and reasons you may or may not use something other than Migrate API.
Well, the Migrate API is sort of the icing on the top once you've figured out what you want to do. But if you don't know what you want to do, the saying goes, any road will take you. You got to sit down and plan. And if you've ever looked at whenever you look at a migration project, it is a project. It's a left and a right, or I've got to take what's over here and throw it over here. But you got to figure out what it is that you want to move from left to right. Sometimes this quote migration is hiring a summer intern and them copying, pasting, and that's more efficient. That's more cost effective than automating it. A lot of times it isn't. And that's where the Migrate API comes into play. You also have to just figure out what data do you want to pull over. Some of this is blog posts from 15 years ago. Maybe we should store that as HTML and no longer, there's a lot of decisions that need to come in. Do you want to bring over? And that's what goes into those first initial phases of figuring out what you're going to be migrating. Well before you open up your IDE, it really is planning.
And from a technical standpoint, Drupal in general, this is not only from a migration standpoint. Drupal is a collection of a lot of different APIs. There are books that try to cover as many as possible. We can start naming them. There will be more than 10, 15, 20 different APIs, and they are all connected. They are all interconnected. So when we migrate content, when we migrate configuration, we also touch on the entity API. We also touch on the field API. We talk about validation constraints. We talk about the database API and different content modeling strategies that might be applied. So again, like even though the focus is on migrating the data, we take a holistic approach and we try to, when necessary, when appropriate, in the right context, explain these other API that are connected.
Yeah, even if you're doing a large scale migration, there may be aspects where you want to do things manually. There may be small scale migrations that aren't worth automating, like you said, Lucas, and even using the Migrate API entails a lot of different things. So the first main section of the book is about planning and preparation. And one of the biggest topics in this is the source site audit. And it is one of the most fundamental and important aspects of a migration. Why is that?
There is a saying that goes measure twice, code once, and that is basically what we want to cover in this section. Do you have a Drupal 7 site that might be running for years? We have migrated projects that have been running for 10 plus years, and along that time they have accumulated a lot of content, and to be honest, sometimes craft that for one it might not be necessary to move over. Another thing is that technology evolves and you might want to leverage features that were not available before. And in the past, in the current site, you had to resort to things that would be considered not good practices anymore. So basically, you take an X-ray of your current site, both from a perspective of what data I have, how this data and different features support my business, and also from a technology standpoint, how things were implemented and how they can be improved. So after taking that, X-ray, that snapshot, you start thinking, you start planning. This is what Lucas was saying before about your new site. Like you have a vision, you know what tools are going to be available in modern versions of Drupal, and then you start making the mapping to be able to connect the two.
We're going to talk about the automated tooling in a second. One of the things that I think makes this book so valuable to people are the resources that you provide. One of those is a source site audit checklist, a guide to walk you through the process. Tell me more about that.
Yes, along with the code repository, there is a file that gives you commands that you can execute against your Drupal 7 site. One of them will give you a list of all the modules and themes that are currently enabled. So from a very high level perspective, you can get a sense of what modules were being used. You can verify if they have compatible versions in newer version of Drupal. As part of also of the migration, there are modules and tools that we run in the site itself that will give you replacements of modules when they are found. So from one, in one sense, we cover modules and themes, but we also go beyond. And in particular, we execute and provide the commands that you can use to execute a audit of the database. And there is a spreadsheet, a template that after running those SQL queries, basically, you can copy over to a Google Sheet, and then you can have, an even greater understanding of your current site. There are queries to analyze content types, how many of exist on the website, how many nodes are there, whether they are published or not, or the percentage of published versus unpublished nodes. We have information about taxonomy terms, fields, views, menus, web forms, field collections, roles, files, text formats, image effects, basically a lot of the components that make a Drupal 7 website. You get just by issuing some commands, the information, you put it in the spreadsheet, and There are some calculations that happen automatically, but just from having the information is useful to understand, oh, this content type is no longer being used. This vocabulary really doesn't need to be there. And why do I have 3 web forms that have 0 submissions and things like that? So by running these queries and analyzing the database and the actual content, you can determine what things to keep, what things to drop, and when necessary, and this is something that is covered also in the series, when you want to apply content model changes. Let's say you went from nodes to a different entity like media in the new site.
I mean, Lucas, this is something that you and I work on a lot, right? People come to us, they want to do a migration, and the first question they ask is, how long is it going to cost, and how long is it going to take me? And this, obviously, sometimes we have the opportunity to go through a discovery, but often, very early up front, after a phone call or two, we need to get people a ballpark, and this process is fundamental to what we do.
I kind of have a funny story there. So, we write these blog posts and we put them out there, and I read them as they come out. And so I was working on one of your estimates, Michael, and for a client, and someone reminded us, well, did you look at Mauricio's spreadsheet for collecting all of the answers to all these questions that we were sort of fumbling through trying to figure out, well, how many field collections are there? Where's the, all of the questions that if we stopped and thought, we would have had all of them right there in front of us. So it's invaluable because these are the things we already are doing, but it's not very thorough. And so then we put our fingers up in the air and we're like, well, okay, this size. And then we could be totally wrong. And that's very costly, not only for us as an agency, but also for the client when they get the wrong impression for either how big or how small that of work they got to do. Because they have things that they could use their money for if we overbid. And likewise, no one likes to be told it's going to be this small, and then it's 5 times as much as what everyone thought it was once we got in, because then we got in and we found how messy the data was.
So what I'm hearing is we shouldn't publish this ebook because Mauricio's giving away our secret sauce. Is that the moral of that story?
No, it's still a lot of work, and there's still a lot of, you can't send AI at everything and then have it spit out a solution. There's still a lot of knowledge in the brain of Mauricio that I wouldn't go to someone else if I had the option.
For sure.
One thing about the book is this is a reference to my future self. So yes, these commands, basically I execute every day. Like the book is something that I bookmark and I consult myself over and over because we have given so much information, and just like commands that you can execute by just copying and pasting and you get exactly the information that you need, that like yes, it's valuable for everybody, but also as a developer doing this on a daily basis for years, this is like my basically my cheat sheet in which I can just go copy paste and I have the information that I need to fulfill a specific task.
I think that's what Lucas was really saying. We bounce between all sorts of different types of estimates. We're moving fast. It's a really great resource to have to remind ourselves and have a thorough plan process every time we go through this as consistent as possible. And it really is what we use. It is what you guys should use as well. So I hope everybody checks that out. The next big section is about both the example repository and the automated migration process. I want to hear more about the tooling that you provided, like how you say, oh, we provided with tooling to do a migration. What does that mean, and how easy is it to get up and running? Like, could I do it?
Yes. So basically, the examples repository that we provide is based on DDEP. You can go to ddep.com for more information, but it is, in my opinion, the best option to have local development environments for Drupal, and not only for Drupal for that matter. Like DDEP supports 20 plus platforms, but focusing on Drupal and in the specific example that we provide, we give you two sites, one Drupal 7 site, one Drupal 11 site that is fully configured. You execute about 5 commands for each, and you have a fully working Drupal 7 site and a Drupal 11 site ready to be migrated. Basically, a skeleton in which you can start going through the series and executing the commands. You will have in the end a migrated site. So for one, we use DDEP for having both a Drupal 7 and a Drupal 11 site. And then we resort to tools that are provided both by Drupal core and by contributed modules, many of which Lucas maintains, that helps with the automation process. In particular, we use the core Migrate API, which supports migrating from Drupal 6 and Drupal 7. But if you are only use that, it will try to get a one-to-one copy of the legacy site. And in many cases, that is not what you want. We have been discussing, you might want to remove content or old features and configurations. You want to leverage new features. Um, you want to make changes to the content model and optimizations in general. So having a verbatim copy is rarely what you really want to do. So then we go on to explain like other modules that you can use to generate and automate some of that migration, some of the content and the configuration automatically, but with the option to tweak and customize to your specific needs. And in the subsequent sections, we explain the process of customizations, what was generated automatically.
When I asked if I could do it, I appreciate you're not saying maybe.
No. So going back to DDEP has fantastic support, and literally anybody with a computer can download the tool and have it up and running with very little friction.
Yeah, huge shout out to Randy Fay and the DDEV community. We're big supporters of them, and it really is an amazing and easy tool. And that's exactly what I use when I need to fire up a demo or get something done. One of the things that really surprised me about this was the number of articles that you had in the migration of configuration section. I would have thought that it was maybe an article or two, not a section with 9 articles. Lucas, why is configuration such a huge part of a data migration?
I remember it's probably been 8 years ago, working on splitting out in Drupal core the differentiation between configuration and content migrations. And that's where we added all of those tags and all of the migrations of Drupal core. So that's what we then end up standing on the shoulders of with all of these automated tools. I'm waiting for Mauricio to nod, because I think that's what exactly we're doing. Configuration is the stuff in Drupal 7, like features or just those settings and configurations of the site. They tend to be set and forget, and we need to make sure that when we pull over, say, path auto or meta tags or core configuration, that we take the old name of whatever the setting and the toggle was and pull it into the right new name. And then once you're done with configuration on a site, you end up not having to touch that ever again. It was just sort of like pull this stuff over. And in my experience, I do the configuration. Once I get the configuration right, I just sort of scrap and throw that in the dustbin and then start focusing on the content. Is that, Mauricio, your approach then too?
Yes, that's what is explained and core in the series. We basically cover all of the configuration first, and then we have a skeleton. So let's take a step back a little bit. Configuration would be things like your content types, your fields, your vocabularies, your media types, your paragraph types, and so on. it is possible to have this skeleton with all the configuration elements in place without having, one piece of content. So that's what we do. Initially, we go over everything configuration-wise to have these boxes in which we can start adding content into. And something anecdotal, if you will, about this section, until relatively recently, most of the migration projects that I was involved with didn't include automatic migration of configuration. Why? Because it was until recently that Drupal 7 end of life was real, that people started to hurry to get their site updated because they needed to be on a supported version of Drupal. And they were willing to make the compromise of foregoing some improvements, even if that meant, having a one-to-one copy or as close as possible copy of what they had before, provided that they are on a supported version of Drupal. So very early on, people were, we're going to re-platform, we're going to invest a lot of time and effort into this project. We want to get it right, and we're going to take advantage of all the new things. So in those cases, people were actually building the new site from scratch in Drupal 10 or Drupal 11, and after that shell, if you will, was created, only the content needed to be moved into the new structure. But nowadays, people again are in a hurry, and this automatic migration of configuration also helps them. And along the way, we mentioned at the beginning, this was about a year-long effort. Drupal itself continues to evolve. As part of the series, we don't try to use the Migrate API as the one and only solution for everything. As Michael was saying, we talk about and we discuss other APIs. So of course, the focus is the Migrate API. Most of the configuration gets migrated automatically, but at some point, we also talk about when manual changes are easier to do and more cost efficient to do. But in particular, the last two blog posts in this section talk about recipes. And recipes is not something that you normally encounter or discuss when talking about a migration because it's a relatively new concept. But there are many things that are already available using recipes in Drupal 10 and Drupal 11 that just like by applying, again, some commands that you can copy and paste from the series, you get not only configuration created for you, but configuration modeled after what Drupal core uses out of the box. So you can have this confidence that you are working with something that has been battle tested because it is part of Drupal core, and also that is going to be familiar with your future self and other developers that they know how Drupal core works out of the box. And this set of media types, for example, they will know how to interact with them just by because it would be the same as with any other Drupal 10 or Drupal 11 site that they ever encounter. So we talk about um, the technical part of things, but we also try to think about what is more efficient and what other tools might be available for you to accomplish the same task.
The migration of content is the final section, and obviously, a big chunk of the book. Just at a high level, what are some of the key things that you cover in that?
The first thing is do not shoot yourself in the foot. And I mention it because um, in every single migration project that I have worked with, at some point there are problems because of not planning well. Um, how to handle the migration of configuration. In particular, Drupal nowadays uses numerical identifiers for keeping track of content. So which is the case for large scale projects, if you need to break down your project into multiple phases and potentially multiple months, um, you will be doing migrations over and over in an incremental way. And at some point, you are going to give a partially migrated site to people who will be testing the new site, the new features, and so on. And if you don't plan carefully, you might end up with conflicted entities, IDs, and so on. So the first article in that section, it talks about how to prevent this. As I said before, planning is key. And before ever giving you the instructions on how to start migrating content. We give you like all the red lights that you need to be thinking about in the future. And in every other subsequent article that talks about migration of content, we have a dedicated section about, okay, remember to do this, remember to take these actions in order to prevent entity conflicts in the future. Another thing that is also covered in every content migration is a section on performance, how, in particular, how to use a tool called high watermark to improve the performance of the specific entities that you will be migrating. So, with that preface, then we talk about migrating files, users, taxonomy terms, how to apply entity model changes, like the specific example that we cover in the book is going from field collections in Drupal 7 to paragraph in Drupal 11. We also talk about migrating media, migrating nodes, and so on. There are plenty of examples, and in some cases, the same entity is in Drupal 7 and in Drupal 11, but there are also a couple of examples when you want to apply content model changes. What are the considerations that you need to take in order to do that properly?
I want to ask a personal question. You wrote a blog post, a really in-depth blog post with code examples, plus there's all of the tooling, the checklist. You published at least one big thing every week and a half on average for a year. That's a huge endeavor, and it took a tremendous amount of drive. I'm really curious. How did you stay motivated? Like, how did you drive yourself to do this over the last year?
Well, it's many things. For one is one way to give back to the community. I have received so much from Drupal, so this is one way in which I can say thank you. Another thing is what I said before, this is my guide to my future self. And to be honest, it's my guide to my everyday self. And probably what you are trying to say is like, yes, these are very technical articles, and you know writing one can take 20 plus hours, just the writing process, not counting the review, the editing, and everything that comes after the fact. So to keep me motivated, to keep me sane, I also try to, be fun from time to time. And in the articles, there are many Easter eggs. If you pay close attention, you will find references to Drupal stuff. If you see a number that looks strange, maybe that can be a date that is important in the history of Drupal. Um, we also, like, if you see dimensions in an image, that might be the year something happened, or again, a date. And there are references to movies, there are references to songs. There is even a full um, training session in one of the articles. So yeah, look them up, and feel free to ping me on social media, on Slack, if you find them, because again, it is a lot of effort from a technical perspective. So in order to keep it interesting for myself and for the readers, I try to put fun from time to time inside the articles themselves.
Yeah, that's a really great point to acknowledge. I mean, I can't thank you enough for all of your hard work on this, but Yano Zureots, did a tremendous amount of editing and feedback. June Gregg, Brian Pruitt, Jeff Sheltrin, so many people chipped in. Lucas to give feedback, review code, and help along the way. And so thank you to everybody who helped Mauricio make this a huge success. Before we wrap up, let's just touch on the book. The book is out now. It is free. You can get it at tag1.com/migrate-book. Mauricio, is this online only, in print? And what all does it include?
So what you are going to get is a mobile version, and that mobile version can mean PDF, ebook, or mobile, depending on your preference of format and device in which you will be reading it. If you would like to see it printed, let us know and we can work on that. And in addition to the book itself, the accompanying code repository that we mentioned before, that is at github.com/Tag1 Consulting, and it is linked from the book itself.
Awesome. Well, Mauricio, thank you so much for all of your hard work on this book. Lucas, thanks for your help, and thank you both for joining us. All the links we mentioned, we'll put them in the show notes. Please remember to upvote, subscribe, and share this with other Drupalists. Check out our past Tag1 Team Talks at tag1.com/TTT. That's 3 T's for Tag1 Team Talks. And as always, we'd love your feedback, your input on this book. Tell us if it was helpful to you, useful to you, what changes you'd like. Tell us if there are topics you want us to cover in future shows, whether it's migrate or something else. You can reach us at ttt@tag1.com. That's TAG1.com. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.